without further ado, we will start. So now for the workshop presentation, which is my portion. Just a little bit about me. As I said, I'm a current law student. I did graduate from McMaster with a Bachelor's of Arts in Justice, Political Philosophy, and Law. I know it's a mouthful, but we just usually call it JPPL. And following that, I did work at Enterprise, the car rental company in the business management sector. And I did also, while I was doing that, I did train in alternative dispute resolution at York University. And all of that was essentially to kickstart my legal career. So when the COVID pandemic hit, I studied for the LSAT, I passed. And I got accepted to Windsor's Faculty of Law for their JD program, and I am currently pursuing my JD in order to start a career in law. This summer, after I've completed my 1L, which is my first year of law school, I'm working at OneHub Growth as a Canadian Summer Jobs employee, as their Community Informations Officer, facilitating these kinds of workshops and social work services to the community and our clients. Okay, so through the poll earlier, we should see that where you stand now can be any one of these three categories. And it's likely you're one of these. Either you're thinking about possibly becoming a lawyer in Canada, you're already in the process of becoming a lawyer in Canada. For example, like me, you're in law school, you're getting your NCAs, you're completing your licensing, etc. Or you're already a lawyer and you're curious about the prospects of practicing law or finding a job in Canada. So you probably are any one of these three people, and I think that this workshop will be perfect regardless of which category you belong to. Now, before we get started, the first question we probably want to answer is, what is a lawyer? And so what is a lawyer will really depend on, a lot of factors. But starting off, a lot of us and what we think about lawyers probably comes from entertainment, media, movies, TV shows. I have a few up here. We're probably all familiar with Suits, Jim Carrey's famous Liar, Liar. Depending on, what kinds of things you've been exposed to, we all have a general idea of lawyers, these fancy, silver-tongued professionals in suits. But there's a lot more than just what TV shows us. And we'll probably go into that a little bit deeper today and get you oriented with the idea of what a lawyer actually is. So a quick dictionary definition right off the bat from Merriam-Webster says a lawyer is one whose profession is to conduct lawsuits for clients or to advise as to legal rights and obligations in other matters. And most of us probably already know this definition. Lawyers are probably in court, they argue for their clients, they represent them. But what does that really mean? Well, a really good indicator for us is the government's description of what a lawyer is. And the government uses the National Occupations Classification, or the NOC. And the specific category for lawyers is categorized under the NOC code 4112, and that includes lawyers and Quebec notaries. I will have a quick slide on just differentiating Quebec notaries and lawyers, but we won't go too deep into that. Today, we will be mainly focusing on lawyers. And for what lawyers do, they can be hired by any government agency at any levels, or they can be employed by private business establishments, firms, or companies in-house. And some lawyers are also self-employed, so you could start your own firm or your own practice. Now, lawyers generally, we advise clients on any legal matters, represent them before administrative boards and committees and courts of laws, and we try and advocate for their interests in things like civil disputes or public prosecutions, depending on what the situation is in those courts. So, before we get into anything else, just a quick differentiation. In Canada, we do have two jurisdictions or two kind of legal systems. We have civil law and common law, and throughout the rest of the world, there are different countries that you adopt these different systems. Common law particularly comes from England, and we're influenced as a Commonwealth nation by that. The most of Canada uses the common law system, though Quebec uniquely uses the civil law system. And Quebec notaries are somewhat unique to the civil law system in Quebec, though it's not that relevant today unless you feel like you might want to practice in Quebec in the future, then you could perhaps consider a job as a Quebec notary. They do have some limitations compared to lawyers. They generally only do non-contentious legal issues, and they don't represent clients in litigation as lawyers often do. And there's just some slight differences in how they can practice and the extent of their practice, but that's generally the difference. But today, like I said, we'll be mainly focusing on lawyers. Now, there's many names for lawyers. You might have heard people refer to lawyers as attorneys, legal practitioner, counsel, barrister, and solicitor. If you look at, for example, the name card of Francis, you probably see it says counsel or barrister and solicitor, and those are just some names for lawyers. They're essentially synonymous and they can be used interchangeably. Barrister and solicitor comes from the common law system in England, where you can practice as a barrister as well as a solicitor. Barrister just does more administrative, non-contentious legal issues, while solicitors can represent their clients in court and advocate for them publicly in that kind of a way. And that's just one way to refer to lawyers, but all of these can be just interchangeable words to refer to a lawyer. But different from names are titles. And I have here the spectrum of titles, as in, if you're a lawyer, you can range anywhere from an articling student, according to the NOC, to an associate, which is just, any practicing lawyer, to perhaps even a higher level as a partner in a firm. And that might reflect your seniority, that might reflect your experience, and it may reflect your status and your level of profession in the industry. But generally, any of these kind of titles you're still qualified as a lawyer. Attached to your title may also be your area of expertise or your area of specialization, and where you practice, such as criminal law or family law, and which is established by the types of courses you focus on in law school. But more importantly, in the industry of law, it's dependent on your work experience and what kinds of fields you've worked in after graduating law school. Now, some general duties that lawyers have. Lawyers generally consult clients with regards to their legal rights and obligations in all matters related to law. They gather evidence, they cite legislation, and they research jurisprudential precedents, which are just basically they research past decisions in previous cases, and they use those cases in order to argue their case in their present disputes. And they also, respond to any or serve any kind of legal claims. They plead or argue for their client's case within the standard processes that are basically available through tribunals and the courts of law that we oftentimes see on television. They also construct legal documents or statements of legal opinions, such as factums, wills, deeds, divorce papers, contracts. These are all things that lawyers engage in, and oftentimes this kind of paperwork is a larger percentage of what lawyers really do behind the scenes than always just representing clients in court, for example. Lawyers also negotiate resolutions to legal disputes, which may include acting as a mediator, a conciliator, or an arbitrator in cases. For example, when I pursued my alternative dispute resolution, it was for the capacity of doing something like this. Before reaching court, a competent lawyer would want to negotiate issues and perhaps reach a settlement with another opposing client or lawyer in order to solve the problem instead of having to drag on to litigation. And they also perform administrative and management functions, which may include having a lawyer act as an executor, a trustee, or a guardian in a person's estates. So lawyers can have many duties, as you can see here. But now that we know what a lawyer is, we want to know why become a lawyer. And there could be several reasons. Oftentimes you think of lawyers, you think of, wealthy individuals, high social status. And, a lot of people's parents want your child to become a lawyer because that's what comes with that kind of a title or that kind of an occupation. But secondary, and I don't think secondary, actually, I think, sometimes primary to people are reasons like self-fulfillment and helping others and just having that role in the community or making an impact. These are all perhaps other kinds of reasons outside of the material reasons or the obvious reasons of social status or wealth. So With that, although I mentioned that, whether or not wealth is one of the reasons why you want to become a lawyer, salary for a job is always important. And I'm sure a lot of parents and students are curious, what would I be making as a lawyer? So I have some quick salary statistics here. The average income of lawyers across Canada is around 129K. And that's according to the government of Canada as well. However, this does range depending on where you are. So for example, if we look at the chart here, if you're in Toronto, you might be making a little bit more. And if you're in Ottawa, you might be making a little bit less than the national average. But that's just all depending on several factors. For example, the population of the city, the amount of business that is going on there, and what the nature of that city or location might be. Like Ottawa is more government focused, so perhaps you might be making a lower salary, but there might be more benefits attached, whereas Toronto is more corporate, and perhaps in those kind of environments, you're looking at a greater income. But again, these factors all vary depending on where you are, but the average is by no means a determination of, the ceilings of what you might be making. So with that average distribution, just showing here on the low end, which again, according to the NOC, lawyers do include articling students. So maybe fresh out of graduation, you might be making a little bit less in the 44, 45K range. But then when you do become a lawyer, you get licensed, you are probably looking, the median income of the middle lawyer right now is probably 131K according to the government of Canada. And on the higher end, you could be making anywhere upwards from 357K. So, it all varies, and oftentimes it's based on your experience in the industry and what kind of firms you choose to work for. There's several factors, like I said, but there's, a gradual rise to how much you can be paid for lawyers, but generally the income aspect is, as people often assume, attractive for lawyers. Income by gender, there are some differences between males and females. Generally speaking, females, according to this chart, are making a little bit less than males, but I don't want this to be a factor that dissuades people from pursuing law. In fact, women make up a large percentage of people who get accepted into law school and graduate, and they stand for a large percentage of the industry, which we'll actually see in statistics later. But the factors as to why females might be paid a little bit less than males is dependent, but we can look into that in the future. Just a note here as well that these slides and this information and data will all be provided for you afterwards. So if you fail to follow along or you miss something, don't worry, this will all be provided for you. As there's so much information to cover today, we're not going to go extremely deep, but we will go over, I will act as a guide for you through the information that we'll be seeing. Also here, we do have income by education. As you can see, for normal occupations, the higher the degree, the more income on average people are making. But the interesting thing here is that actually the amount of income you make in the legal industry, it doesn't actually matter, or it doesn't necessarily correlate with the higher degree. As you can see, people who achieve their doctorate's degrees and pursue law aren't necessarily making more than those who just completed their bachelor's degree and went on to complete law school. And so this is a trend here that's just meant to show you that, pursuing a higher level of education doesn't necessarily mean a higher level of pay. More so in the industry, it's about your experience following law school. Now, another reason is the critical role that lawyers serve. You are a bridge between your clients and the law, for which they would otherwise not understand and have no expertise in. And by being that bridge, you are also a guide that enables your clients to competently and confidently navigate themselves within the complexities of a legal system. And finally, you are the ambassador who champions and supports the interests of your clients against injustices by applying your legal knowledge and your skills as a lawyer. So that's why you serve a critical role. And by serving a critical role, you also have a high level of responsibility as a lawyer. by serving that role, you may control the well-being of your clients in your hands. You protect their legal rights. You uphold ethical standards of integrity. You help maintain social order through the legal system of your country or your province, and you persuade the executors of legal power, or judges and heads of tribunals, with your skills to help your clients, and you influence legal precedent. Like I said, you create the decisions, you help influence the decisions that become law in the future. And that means you also have a major impact. And you can see here a lot of major contentious issues in society today. Things like abortion, women's suffrage, euthanasia, free expression, they're all linked to some sort of legal case that involved lawyers that argued in those cases. And so you will have a real impact in society. You will affect the laws and the culture, essentially, within your province, within your city, within your country, and within Canada, and perhaps even the world. So as a lawyer, you have the power to make change. And so that might be also another big reason you would want to become a lawyer. So now that we know what a lawyer is and why we might want to be a lawyer, the big part is how to become a lawyer. Now, the basic qualifications is that you need at least 2 to 3 years of undergrad. In Quebec, it's a little bit different, but as I said, we'll be focusing on Ontario and probably most of the common law provinces in Canada. Successful accomplishment of the bar examination and completion of a mandatory period of articling is also necessary, and official licensing from the corresponding provincial or territorial law society where you plan to practice in, and registration with the Canadian Bar Association is also a qualification. So depending on where you study, just like in the States, if you study as a certain state, or in Canada, if you study in a certain territory or province, you will have to get licensing from the law society of that province or state or territory. Now, the timeline of progression generally is as follows. We do have an infographic that reflects this that will be provided to you later, but generally you will be graduating high school, and that's when you start thinking about, your courses. What is my future? That's why they have the careers course then. And then following that, you will cater your education towards an undergrad, and you will do that towards as your post-high school or post-secondary education. Those two sectors or sections of education in your life is considered the preliminary education. After that, you will after you graduate from your undergrad in university, you will probably develop your resume by working, perhaps. That's one option. Or you can go straight into the LSAT. Some people take the LSAT while they're still in undergrad, and that is the first step towards applying to law school. Eventually, you will apply to law school and you will provide all your documents, which we will go into deeper in the following slides, and you will either be successful or not, and you can try again. And when you do apply to law school and you succeed, you will be in law school. Then your legal education and licensing process begins. You complete law school, and then following that, you will probably have the chance to do articling. You may work during your summers while you go through your law school education, and finally you write the bar exam and you get called to the bar, you finish all your licensing requirements, and now you can practice law. So this is the general progression towards your legal career. Now we'll go into a little more detail. So the preliminary education, like I said, at first you're in high school. There's no required courses or anything like that. Do what you want with your electives, but try and get good grades, because you want to cater your high school education towards university. There are exceptions. Some college students can make it into law school, but generally speaking, the mass majority of individuals that go into law school do have a university degree. So you should cater your courses for academic rather than college and go on to university. And that's already a time when you start to think what kind of programs I can get into in university, because once you get into university, you will have to complete some sort of bachelor's degree for your undergrad and use that to go towards law school. There are no restrictions on where or what you study for your undergraduate degree. There's no specific university you have to go to or specific program you have to be in. Anybody can apply to go to law school as long as you finish your undergrad and your high school degree. And the graduate degrees are also not necessary. You can apply straight out of your undergrad, but you can also apply after your graduate education if you'd like to, but again, not a requirement. But in terms of, you might be thinking, what would I study, or what programs might be a little bit better? Well, for law school, your although it doesn't matter what you study, they won't bar you if you study at a certain school or a certain program, but how well you do in that field and whether the reputation of your school does still influence your applications. And some of the pre-law fields of study, we call them pre-law, and it's the program before you get into law school. There are some that are more recommended because they better prepare you for law school. Those could be, the ones listed here are the most popular ones. So business, philosophy, history, English, political science, and engineering. The reason for business is very simple. Business-minded people, they understand, the economy, they understand the business world, and those people usually are well-oriented to go on to law school. And once you become a lawyer, Francis will probably speak to this, but having business knowledge is a huge help. Half of being a lawyer is being a businessman or businesswoman. So obviously business is one choice. Philosophy, history, and English, their common characteristic is that you do a lot of reading and writing. Same thing with political science. And reading and writing is a large portion of what you do in law school. So having those kind of courses better prepare you. And when admissions officers look at your application, they might say, wow, this is the student that's better prepared. They've done a lot of reading and writing, so they will likely succeed in law school. And so they might accept you or favor your background. Engineering is an odd one, but engineers have a very high level of logic, and a huge part of being a lawyer is having good logical mind. And also there's a lot of sectors in law, for example, like patenting or intellectual property, where an engineering degree or a STEM background actually helps you quite a bit. So you're not barred depending on what you study. Now, if you study anything else, you can still apply to law school, but these are some of the ones that are usually singled out to be the best ones. And there's a higher percentage of these students that get into law school. Now, following your graduate education, you will have the option to work first. And that's what I chose to do personally. I did work straight out of my undergrad, and that does develop your resume. And that developed resume will boost your, alongside your academic credentials, will boost your application and will look attractive to admissions officers when they're looking at your application to law school. Most law schools appreciate students that display a certain degree of maturity, and professional work experience reflects that best. This is also a chance for you to take a break, perhaps from the academic environment for a while, and maybe even make some savings for law school, because law school tuition does get expensive, anywhere from around like 20K or more, especially if you're going to a more reputable law school. So, working a bit right out of after graduating with your degree might be a good thing for you to just, experience something and experience the working world a bit. However, you don't have to. A lot of people just go straight into the LSAT, and the LSAT is a requirement, unlike working. That's just an option. The LSAT is the law school admissions test, and you need to take it and get a good score in order to get into law school. There are 3 types of sections that are on the test. There's logical reasoning, logic games, and reading comprehension. I've indicated them as LR, LG, and RC respectively. Now, on every test, there are going to be 6 sections, and this is the traditional standard structure. And there used to be a flex option during COVID, but they've discontinued that, and now they went back to the standard method. It's always wise to check online before you sign up for the test and see if there's any changes, but this is usually what the LSAT is structured. So there's 6 sections. There's going to always be 2 logical reasoning, 1 logic games, and 1 reading comprehension. And those sections are in no particular order. And in addition to those 5, there's also going to be an unscored experimental section, and you don't know which kind or which type of section it'll be. It could be logical reasoning, it could be logic games, it can be reading comprehension. You don't know what order they will be in, and you don't know which section is unscored. So essentially that forces you to do well on all the sections and do the best you can. And hope that the ones you did the best in are the ones that are scored. And In addition to that, there's also a take-home writing sample. The importance of that is quite low. It is a chance for some schools to look at your writing and how well you do, but it is something that's administered after the test. You take it home, you answer a question. It's like a short little essay where you give your opinion or argue for something, and it's just one factor that's in the test that you have to do, but it's usually not very weighted in your application. Now, each section is 35 minutes long and facilitated in a multiple choice format. So you choose between usually 5 options, A, B, C, D, E, and with a brief 15-minute break after the third section. So it's quite a long test. You're looking at 3 hours or more. So you do need to prepare for that. You can register through the Law School Admissions Council or the LSAC, and you pay a $200 fee to take the test once on any available date within the year, but you have an unlimited number of attempts as of September 2017. It used to be you can only do 3 times a year, and you have 7 tries in a lifetime, but now you can do as many times as you want, though I would say after your 3rd or 4th time, you might want to consider whether or not law is for you, just because after so many tries, schools may have a bias towards whether or not you can succeed, although there's no barring and it doesn't mean that you can't succeed. I actually did my test like 3 times and I succeeded getting the best score on my 3rd one. So by no means be discouraged if your 1st or 2nd test doesn't come out as you would like. You could always have time to improve. Now, the results are calculated competitively on a percentile scale ranging from 120 to 180, which means how well you score is not just based on whether you do well, but dependent on your performance relative to everyone else taking the test at the same time as you. So during that testing term, how well you do compared to others is very important. A lot of people ask, how do I pass the LSAT? You can easily pass the LSAT and do better than 50%, for example. But to really get a competitive and good score depends on how well you do according to others. So we have this chart here. Most people, score in the 155 to 159 range. 160 is oftentimes the kind of cutoff a lot of law schools have. If you should get 160 or above to be a competitive player in the game, essentially. People who score in the high 170s to 180s, very low. I believe in these years, this is a 2017 and 2018. In 2018, I think only 31 people scored above 175. And very few people also score very low and fail it in the 120s to 140 range. So most people end up in this bell curve, and you want to try and push as far as you can up that scale and try and do well relative to others. Now, to do well, there's a lot of resources available, so don't be frightened. I personally use many of these resources. Some of them are offered online, some of them offer in-person classes, some of them are free, but however, most of them are paid, especially the ones that are very helpful. And yeah, I have them listed here. They're easily searchable online, and they offer a range of services according to your budget and things like that. And the Law School Admissions Council themselves also provide free resources and booklets with practice tests, and those are extremely helpful as well. So, refer to this when you're preparing for your LSAT. Now, with the LSAT out of the way, the application process is next, and you can apply to law school programs that are offered at post-secondary institutions through certain application portals where you will upload your personal information, resume, transcripts, and additional documents. And for your province, it may vary, but in Ontario, for example, for those of you already in university, the Ontario Universities or OUAC Application Center is the way you would go. Or for BC, maybe the Education Planner, British Columbia. Those are all options. You apply to them, you create a profile there, and you apply. So but outside of your academic grades and how well you do in the LSAT, there are your supplementary submissions, and some of you might be familiar with that through your university applications, but those really give the admissions officers an idea of who you are and what you've done as extracurriculars, or maybe you worked outside of your academics. And so there's that academic element. Most schools are looking for a cumulative grade point average or CGPA of 3.6 or more. And the LSAT score should be around or above 158 at least to be competitive. Now, if you do a little poorer in one section, but do amazing in another, that could offset your poor score. So you're not dead in the water, as they say, if one of them is a little bit bad, but you want to try on average to get as best as you can in all of those categories, in both of those categories. For your supplementary elements, it's extremely important. That could be an interview, it could be an essay, it could be short answers to a series of questions. Different universities and different law schools have different requirements. You can find those requirements usually around the application dates. They will post them on their websites, and you will follow those instructions and you will provide that. This is a good chance for you to show them who you are and really stand out. And with that, you can apply. Obviously, don't try and apply late. Always apply early or on time, and that's anywhere between September and February for each annual cycle for the applications of law school. Now, there's some statistics here. There's more people who apply through in East Canada than West Canada, but again, all of these, there's also more females that apply than males and get in. More females get in than males. I think my class this year, over 70% of them are females. So again, there's all of these statistics just show that there really isn't any barring for law school. Any kind of background you have, you can succeed. This is just an ethnicity poll. You know, there's a huge growth in Asian applicants recently, about 10.5% in change. So, you know, depending on what background you are, there really a lot of law schools are looking for people coming from diverse backgrounds and can offer a new cultural perspective in their practice of law. Now, just some numbers that some of you might be waiting. Here are some law schools: Toronto, Osgoode, Ottawa, Windsor, which is one I go to, Queens, Western, McGill. These are all schools in Ontario with the exception of McGill. And as you can see, around 2,000 to 3,000 applicants apply. Only around 200 or so get accepted. And it's a small enrollment rate. You're looking at about, the acceptance rate is about like 7 to below 10% usually. And so it's very competitive, and it's just something you need to prepare for. You will be fighting against many applicants and you want to stand out. And again, that's why your supplementary applications is going to be very important. Most people have good grades today, especially if you're going to think of applying to law school. So it's all about what you do in addition to your academic work that will define who you are and help your success towards law school. Once you get to law school, you will probably be pursuing a JD. There used to be an LLB program, though that isn't really in fashion anymore. And a JD degree is around 3 years, and you can do it alongside a dual degree, such as an MBA or a Master's of Social Work, for example, which may increase your learning period by about a year or so, but you will come out with 2 degrees, which may be very helpful and help expand your opportunities. And completing law school grants you with a graduate entry professional doctorate's degree. And that degree is a requirement for licensing going forward. In law school, you will have academics and you will have extracurriculars. Try and balance those. You want to get good grades. You want to build your foundations in first year. You want to practice legal research and writing and mooting. But then for extracurriculars, you want to network, you want to meet professors, you want to join or even create your own clubs, enter competitions and leadership events that help you stand out in your resume, and volunteer in community pro bono organizations and legal clinics to garner some initial legal experience before you go into the working field. Now, I put this slide of the practical advantage. This is just here for you to see that it's important for you to have that practical advantage by working during the summers. And there are things like internships, co-op placements, and OCIs available for you to do that over the summers. Then finally, you will go into articling afterwards. But briefly here, if you are abroad, you will have to go through the NCA process and get accreditation and get your certificate of qualification through the NCA process if you're a foreign lawyer. Okay, and now with articling requirements, if you do finish the NCA or you finish law school, you have to go and get articling. You can apply at a firm, and these are the processes available for you to do that, and you will be able to complete your placement, and that will finish your articling requirement for the Law Society. There are a lot of stages for applying, and these are all available for you to review later when you get these slides. And there are different types of articling as well, based on what kind of principals, and principals are basically the firms that you work for, and that those could vary. Now, after all of that, you finally have the bar exam. You write that. There is a barrister component and solicitor component. That's why they're called baristas and solicitors. You finish those, both of those parts of the test. It's a single test. It's self-study, open book, multiple choice. And anecdotally, 90% of people pass. It is not a test designed to fail you. This is just a test. Do you have the skills necessary from your articling in law school and education to become a lawyer? When you pass that, you get called to the bar. You finish your licensing requirements with the Law Society for your province or state, and you will get your license and you can practice law in Canada. And with that, you finally can go and job search. The general unemployment rate of lawyers is only 2.2%. So you are very likely to find a job in Canada. It's a very attractive industry. And also approximately 94% of new graduates from Canadian law schools do get employed in law-related occupations. So for those parents worried about their children finding jobs, it's not a worry if they can get through law school in that entire experience. Previous work experience always looks attractive to potential employers, and it determines what area of law you will begin to basically go into post your graduation. So employment data here, just some quick ones. You know, more males than females in the industry. Most lawyers are full-time rather than part-time, and most are employed, but some are self-employed as well. And there's a large amount of lawyers in professional and technical services, though there are other industries that you can be in. Now, finally, a fundamental guide as my concluding slide is just organize your time, establish your networks with people, exercise persistence, and really go at your goal and improve rather than giving up. Capitalize on market trends and technology and how the world is changing. Practice innovation, be unique, be new. And finally, take care of yourself, both mentally and physically in terms of health, because if you're not healthy, you most likely won't be able to do the rest of the from 1 to 5 successfully. So keep those in mind, and you should be able to be successful in your application towards being a lawyer, as well as after you become a lawyer. And with that, we will go into our interview that ends the presentation, and we will quickly introduce our guest speaker, Francis. So I have the pleasure of having Francis here with us. Francis was called to the bar in Ontario in 2014. He began his legal career in-house at a major Ontario transportation agency, practicing commercial and real estate law. And he subsequently started his own practice, serving clients of various backgrounds in the Greater Toronto area, and including major clients such as LG Electronics, etc. And that was prior to joining Metcalfe, Blaney and Burns, or MBB LLP this in 2020. So now he's working there, and in addition to all of that, Francis is a member of the Federation of Asian Canadian Lawyers. He's part of the Canadian Bar Association and Toronto Lawyers Association. So he's a very established professional in the industry, and we're very, very privileged to have him here with us today for our interview. So we have some interview questions. If Francis is available, we'll just wait for him to come on.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. Please go ahead. Yep.
Awesome. So we'll just start with the first question. What were your first impressions of what being a lawyer meant before you decided to pursue it as a career, and what motivated or inspired you to do so?
Well, I think it's probably just a professional advisor type of a role, and people wearing suits working in offices. And I had an engineering career before I decided to pursue a legal career. And after I went through it, I did various different types of jobs out in the engineering field. In the end, it didn't really appeal to me, and doing calculations, working on sort of drawings, etc. I felt like I really like dealing with people more, solving day-to-day problems from various different fields, as opposed to just working on like one little machine. For instance, it fits with my personality more, and that's why I decided to pursue the legal career. When I was doing engineering, I think I started about the second year into my engineering undergrad. I realized it's probably not what I wanted to do. to. And my thought was, I could always try doing legal for like the first term of law school. If I don't like it, I can always back out. And once I got there, I loved it. So I decided to stay.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody changes, right? So you
Yeah,
never know,
yeah,
like you could be pursuing one thing and
yeah.
then you'll change to the next. So that's really interesting. Another question we have here is, which of the two standardized tests did you find to be more difficult, the LSAT or the bar exam? And what strategies did you employ to try and get a good score in each?
LSAT was more difficult because it's not just, as you said, it's not just about passing. It's more about getting, being like top 10, 20%. Bar exam, they try not to fail people. I think it's different from every province. Ontario, the pass rate is usually 70% or higher. So if you don't pass, you can write it as many times as you want, as far as I remember. So that's not as big of a deal. Studying for LSAT, there are good books back in my day. I don't know what the situation is now, but there are some good guides that you can use. With practice exams, real past LSATs you can write and time yourself. I personally found like it's kind of diminishing returns. Once you do like 10 practice exams or 5 even, you kind of get the general gist of of the logistics, how long it takes, how much stamina you need, and what type of issue questions tends to come up. They're usually, the pattern usually very similar, just worded differently, or especially for the logic games, for instance.
Yeah. There's a lot of
Yeah,
patterns.
there's a pattern to it, right? It's like an
Yeah.
IQ test, and because it's kind of like an IQ test, I felt like once you study for it for like just a little while, you kind of just bottleneck. I don't know about other people. I don't know if there's good techniques, but for
Yeah.
me, I felt like once I got through the first 5, 10 tests, my score kind of stabilized. There's not much else I could do. So but I think the main thing is find like a good guide that's helpful. And with the real tests, don't write like a hypothetical one. So it's more like to do some real tests. Don't fall for the fake guides. You waste money on.
Yeah.
Turns out the tests are not even real. It's easier than the actual actual LSAT, which I've
Yeah.
heard does
Do the
happen. So read
actual
the
practice
reviews about the
tests.
guides, which guides are good and which ones aren't. Right. So use the good ones.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you for that, Francis. Another
Yeah.
one we have here is, what should students focus on doing during their law school education, such as maintaining high grades or getting involved in extracurriculars or networking or managing personal health? Like what do you think is most
I think if things are still as the way they are back in my day, high grades is still probably the most important. You do have to distinguish yourself. As you said, the job market could be pretty competitive. It's a general competitive situation, right? So, but once your grades are above average, I would say networking is probably a little bit more important. You do have to know how to deal with lawyers, kind of talk to how to talk to them, and interview skills, etc. If you've never done it before, you went straight from undergrad to law school without ever working, that could be a challenge. So that's something to practice. But also health. Other than that, health is quite important as well, because if you don't have health, you can't do either of those things, right? So I think so I would say grades. I would probably say health is number 2, and then networking is number 3. Okay.
Awesome. How long did it take you to locate employment upon graduating from law school, and did you struggle at all? And if not, how do you think the current job market trends are for lawyers?
I felt like I got lucky in the sense that I did struggle a bit during the second year interview process, but I found a job right after I graduated, like 1 week after I graduated, and then it was good because it was a good match. Like Ministry of Transportation kind of matched with my kind of civil engineering background from undergrad, so it was pretty quick. In terms of current job market, it really depends on macroeconomic trends, right? So last few years has been pretty good. Back in 2020, they printed a bunch of money. A bunch of people actually got hired away from the big firms downtown. Like the U.S. firms steal the Canadian lawyers, and then the downtown firms would hire from the mid-sized firms, right? So now, I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, but the news is that the economy may be entering recession, so maybe it's for the next little bit, hopefully not, fingers crossed, it's not going to be as good, but it goes up and down, right? So maybe pay attention to that. And I think there are some statistics from the UT summer hiring process. So they would usually disclose how many lawyers, how many students were hired for summer jobs, which is usually a good indication of how good the market is doing for every year. So you maybe can take a look at that. That's for big firms though. That doesn't speak to
Boutique firms and things
yeah,
like that.
boutique firms, smaller firms. I don't think it talks about government. So it's an indicator, but it's not. It's just for certain types of law, like business law for big companies, right? Other areas harder to say, right? But that being said, in certain during recession, certain fields tends to do better in a law, like litigation, bankruptcy would go up, as you would expect, right? But then when the economy's good, stuff like corporate law and real estate, et cetera, would go up, right? So it kind of balances out. So
Perfect. Once you have achieved credentials to practice law, what do employers within the industry look for the most? What are important skills and stuff that you must have as a lawyer?
I would say for the big firms, I think probably just people skills. And when they interview you, sometimes they would bring in a few different interviewers with different personalities to see if how well you interact with different people. They would know that you probably don't know how to be a lawyer, so don't worry about that part. That's for the big firms. For government, I found when I was doing interviews, just like behavioral questions, etc., they expect that you don't have any legal skills anyways, but then they would train you as a part of the job, the articling process, right? Some of them does the training better than others, right? So it's a little bit of a hit and miss. Other than that, I think, yeah, just social skills as well. But for like smaller firms, I would expect, if they might actually look for more practical skills. Let's say if you worked as a legal assistant before, or you worked as a law clerk before, or if you worked as a real estate agent, even, right? Or as an assistant or real estate agent. I think those would be more helpful.
Yeah.
Something that immediately relevant to the business that they're doing. So you have some background knowledge. You can sort of more hit the ground running. I guess for smaller places, they don't have as much time to train as the bigger places. Yeah. So I say those two things. Yeah.
That's good to keep in mind. How do you determine which area of specialization that you go into, or where you want to work, like a smaller or larger firm? How did you do that for yourself?
I think that's probably difficult to tell. People try to ask you this question, oh, what do you want to do really from really early on, right? And I think it's a fair question for them, but also I think it's also fair for someone to say, until you actually done it, you don't really know what's suitable for you. You might think that you have a personality that's suitable for one particular area, or you're interested in one particular area, but you might work in that area and realize, you really are suited for something else. So I don't really want to give like quote unquote advice in this area, because I've seen all kinds of things happen. People bounce around all the time, right?
Would you say then, for example, articling is a good chance for you to see?
Yeah, I think use the opportunity to expose yourself to as much as you can, and then hopefully through that experience you can find something that's you're really good at, and then or you're really interested in, and then and go from there. I'd say, yeah, don't be afraid to experiment a little bit, right? And don't keep an open mind, and things might not be as you expect once you start working, right? And you can change personally on a personal basis as well. So
yeah, that's true. And so kind of you see as you go kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Can you then finally just kind of like what can you describe the nature of being a lawyer, what it's like generally speaking on an everyday basis, and give your advice, the top 3 advice for what you think is the most important things people who are pursuing a legal career should keep in mind?
Okay. So you can go back for a second, I think, on the slide. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So in terms of day to day, it's a little bit different from when you're junior as opposed to when you get a little bit senior. So when you're junior, you're probably working on at the very beginning, depending on where you work, you might even do a little bit of admin stuff just so you can get a better handle on what the admin personnel actually does, right? You're going to be probably doing legal research to answer certain questions. It's part of the learning experience. As you do research, you're going to be looking at various different types of case law and statutes to get more familiar with the law itself. In the particular area you're working on, you're going to be doing more drafting documents, and part of that exercise is so that you can read the documents, read various different versions, from different firms. You can understand generally what's out there. As you get more senior, it's more to do with just directly advising the client. It's more talking, dealing with the client, dealing, negotiating, dealing with the lawyer for the other side, right? That's, your junior lawyer would help you with some of the back end, drafting documents, doing research, that part of stuff. But the actual talking, actual negotiating, you do once you reach a more senior role. So right now, for instance, I have certain people helping me, so I don't do the admin stuff anymore. I don't do the drafting. I would review some, a document. Maybe one of the junior lawyers drafted up, maybe add a little bit stuff to it, maybe ask some questions and send them out to do some research to figure out what the answer is. But yeah, I think most of my day now is, say, probably more than 50% of it is just answering phone calls, having meetings with clients, writing emails, coming up with ideas to see on a high level how to help the client. And there's still some drafting involved, but I say it's less than 50% of the time now, because as time goes on, as you get more and more familiar with the various different types of documents out there, you can be a lot quicker in the work that you do. That's no longer what I do on a day-to-day basis. But yeah, there's also a little bit of marketing as you head a more senior role. Is more about managing the clients and keeping them happy. Maybe take them out to dinner or what have you. Help them celebrate whatever business deal that they just closed. Stuff like that, I say. Sorry, as the second part of your question, did you say it was something like 3 top most important things, or can you repeat that?
Yeah. Well, in the interest of time, I skipped a few questions that
okay,
that
that's fine.
sort of answered in your previous answers. So
sorry. So the next question is.
It's just like, what are the top 3 pieces of advice you would give someone currently pursuing a legal career?
I say, get to know as many legal professionals as you can, ask a lot of questions, and read up on the actual. Don't look at the entertainment, don't look at the TV shows, etc. Right? Read up on like day to day what a lawyer actually does, and then think about whether that's suitable for your personality or not, right? And then just ask a lot of questions, do a lot of research,
Okay.
Awesome. And then keep an open mind, right? So you might be more suitable for one area of the legal career as opposed to another. So you never know, right? So I think especially at the beginning, keep an open mind, ask a lot of questions. That's what I would say.